The wedding stopped being about the groom the moment the convoy appeared. Let the afternoon sunlight spilled across the stone driveway of Willow Creek Estate, turning rows of luxury cars into ribbons of gold beneath a cloudless Georgia sky. Wheated roses lined the pathways. Crystal chandeliers shimmered beneath an enormous reception tent. Soft music drifted across manicured lawns where hundreds of guests celebrated what many called the wedding of the year. Rajan Walker stood near the center of it all, smiling for photographs, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. The successful businessman looked exactly like the man everyone expected him to be. Confident. Accomplished. Admired. Beside him stood Emily Brooks, radiant in an elegant wedding gown, enjoying the attention that followed every movement. The atmosphere felt perfect. Carefully designed. Completely under control. Then the first black SUV rolled through the front gates. At first, only a few guests noticed. A couple standing near the entrance paused their conversation. A valet glanced toward the driveway. One of the photographers lowered his camera. The vehicle moved slowly, reflecting sunlight across its polished surface. Then a second SUV appeared behind it. Then a third. Then a fourth. The convoy advanced in perfect silence along the curved driveway leading toward the estate. Conversations began fading one table at a time. Heads turned. Laughter stopped. Champagne glasses remained suspended halfway to smiling lips. Something about the arrival felt different. Important. Unexpected. Rajan noticed the shift immediately. His eyes followed the attention of the crowd toward the approaching vehicles. A faint crease appeared between his brows before disappearing behind another practiced smile. He had spent months planning every detail of the day. Nothing was supposed to be unexpected. Yet nobody seemed interested in the wedding anymore. Not for the moment. The convoy came to a stop beside the large stone fountain near the entrance. Engines fell silent. The reception music continued playing somewhere in the background, but it suddenly felt distant. Guests exchanged curious glances. Some quietly pulled out their phones. Others whispered theories. Was it a celebrity? A politician? A major investor? Nobody knew. The dark-tinted windows revealed nothing. Near the front of the reception area, Ryan adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit and continued watching. Emily followed his gaze. Do you know who that is? She asked quietly. Rajan shook his head. No, but something about his voice lacked conviction. Around them, anticipation spread through the crowd. The late afternoon breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers and trimmed grass across the estate. Wheated fabric hanging from the reception tent shifted gently in the wind. Everything seemed to pause. Then the lead vehicle's driver stepped out. Moments later, another driver emerged from the second SUV. Then security personnel exited the third. Calm. Professional. Disciplined. The atmosphere changed instantly. Nobody said it aloud, but everyone felt it. Whoever had arrived was important. Very important. Rajan swallowed slowly. Somewhere deep inside, a feeling he could not quite identify began to grow. Not fear. Not yet. More like uncertainty. The uncomfortable realization that a story might be unfolding beyond his control. One of the rear passenger doors unlocked with a quiet click. Every conversation stopped. Every eye fixed on the vehicle. The wedding, the music, the speeches, the carefully arranged perfection of the afternoon all seemed to disappear behind a single unanswered question. Who was inside? The handle slowly began to move. And the entire estate held its breath. The door had not opened yet. Not in the minds of the guests standing beneath the wedding lights. Not in the story that was about to unfold. Because the answer to the question waiting inside that convoy had begun 3 weeks earlier in a small office nearly 20 miles from downtown Atlanta. Vanessa Carter sat alone at the end of a long workday, reviewing shipping contracts while evening sunlight stretched across the hardwood floor. Outside her office window, freight trucks moved through loading bays beneath rows of industrial lights. The workday was ending for most people. For Vanessa, it rarely ended on schedule. A stack of invoices rested beside a half-finished cup of coffee. Her laptop displayed delivery schedules covering 3 states. Nothing about the room suggested luxury. Everything suggested discipline. Her phone buzzed softly. Then an email notification appeared. A few seconds later, her assistant knocked on the office door and stepped inside holding an ivory envelope. "This arrived by courier," she said. Vanessa thanked her and waited until the door closed before picking it up. The envelope felt expensive. Heavy. Intentional. Her eyes settled on the sender's name. Ryan Walker. For several moments, she simply stared at it. Outside, a truck engine rumbled to life somewhere beyond the warehouse yard. Inside, the office remained silent. She did not look surprised. So many people spend years preparing speeches they never deliver. Others spend years waiting for opportunities to prove they were right. Ryan had always belonged to the second group. Vanessa slowly opened the envelope and unfolded the invitation. Elegant lettering filled the page. The wedding date. The venue. The formal request for her presence. Every word appeared polite. Every word appeared respectful. Yet something beneath the surface felt different. She knew Ryan too well. Years ago, when they were building a future together, she could read his thoughts before he spoke them. Success had changed many things about him. It had not changed that. Vanessa placed the invitation on her desk and leaned back in her chair. Memories arrived quietly. Not the dramatic moments. The ordinary ones. Early mornings. Long workdays. Shared dreams scribbled across yellow legal pads. She remembered paying bills while Ryan worked on business plans. She remembered believing sacrifice was temporary. She remembered believing they were building something together. The sunlight faded a little more beyond the windows. Vanessa folded the invitation once and set it beside her laptop. No anger crossed her face. No sadness either. Those emotions belonged to another chapter. Yet she understood exactly what the invitation represented. Somewhere, Ryan expected her to appear. Somewhere, he expected her to see the life he had built and compare it to her own. A faint smile touched her lips before disappearing. Then she returned to her work. Because while Ryan was preparing for a wedding, Vanessa was busy preparing for a future he knew nothing about. Long before the convoy reached the wedding gates, before the whispers and the curious stares, there had been a version of Ryan Walker that very few people at Willow Creek Estate would have recognized. Back then, success was not measured in luxury cars, tailored suits, or magazine interviews. Back then, success meant paying rent on time. It meant keeping the lights on. It meant believing that tomorrow might finally be easier than today. Vanessa Carter remembered those years clearly. She remembered the small apartment they once shared on the edge of Atlanta, where the kitchen table doubled as Ryan's office. Every evening he spread legal pads across the surface and filled them with business ideas while she balanced bills beside him. So many nights they ate takeout because they were too exhausted to cook. Other nights they celebrated tiny victories with grocery store cupcakes because they could not afford anything else. Those memories returned as she sat alone in her office after opening the wedding invitation. Not because she missed them. Because they reminded her of who she used to be. Ryan had always been ambitious. That was part of what she admired about him. While other people talked about dreams, Ryan created plans. He believed he was destined for something larger. Vanessa believed it too. During the early years, she worked wherever she could. She accepted extra shifts. She drove across the city before sunrise. She handled expenses when money was tight. Whenever Ryan doubted himself, she reminded him why he started. Whenever a setback appeared, she helped him move past it. She never viewed it as sacrifice. She viewed it as partnership. Then success arrived. Slowly at first. A new client. A larger contract. More opportunities. More attention. Rajan's company began growing faster than either of them expected. The long nights started paying off. The conversations changed. New people entered their lives. Important people. Wealthy people. Influential people. Somewhere along the way, Ryan changed too. Not all at once. The transformation happened gradually, the way a shoreline changes after years of waves. Small shifts. New priorities. Different conversations. Fewer shared dreams. More private meetings. Vanessa noticed it before she admitted it to herself. The distance growing between them was not measured in miles. It was measured in perspective. One evening, years ago, she sat alone waiting for Ryan to return home from a business event. The food she had prepared had already gone cold. Midnight came and went. When he finally arrived, he looked exhausted but strangely energized at the same time. He talked about investors. Expansion. Recognition. He barely touched the dinner she reheated for him. Vanessa listened quietly. For the first time, she realized she was no longer standing beside the future they once imagined together. Rajan was chasing a different future now. One that seemed to have less room for her with every passing month. Looking back, Vanessa understood something she could not see then. Success had not ruined their marriage. Success had revealed it. The invitation resting on her desk felt heavier than paper because it represented the final result of a journey that began years earlier. Somewhere in Atlanta, Ryan was preparing for the happiest day of his life. And somewhere in a quiet office surrounded by freight schedules and shipping reports, the woman he left behind had become someone he no longer understood. The years immediately after the divorce did not arrive with dramatic music or life-changing opportunities. They arrived with alarm clocks ringing before sunrise and long days that seemed to stretch forever. Vanessa Carter discovered very quickly that rebuilding a life looked far less glamorous than most people imagined. The first office she rented sat in an aging commercial building on the south side of Atlanta. The space measured barely 600 square feet. The carpet showed signs of wear. The paint along the windows had begun to fade. During summer afternoons, the air conditioning struggled to keep up with the Georgia heat. Yet every morning before 6 o'clock, Vanessa unlocked the front door and switched on the lights. Herself. At first, there were no employees. No assistants. No investors. No impressive titles. There was only Vanessa, a laptop, a folding table, and a determination that refused to disappear. She handled customer calls in the morning. Processed invoices during lunch. Negotiated contracts in the afternoon. Answered emails late into the evening. So many nights she remained in the office until the parking lot outside stood completely empty. Nobody applauded those moments. Nobody posted them online. Success often begins in places nobody wants to photograph. While Ryan's name appeared in business magazines and social media posts, Vanessa focused on work that rarely attracted attention. One client became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. She earned every contract the same way. By delivering exactly what she promised. Clients noticed. Referrals followed. Trust accumulated one relationship at a time. Years passed. The company slowly expanded beyond the tiny office where it began. Vanessa hired her first employee. Then another. Then several more. The folding table disappeared. Real office furniture arrived. Computer screens replaced stacks of paper. The business continued growing because the foundation beneath it remained solid. Reliability. Discipline. Consistency. One rainy Thursday evening, nearly 4 years after opening the company, Vanessa sat alone reviewing quarterly reports. Outside, water streamed down the warehouse windows while freight trucks moved through loading docks illuminated by industrial floodlights. A notification appeared on her screen. At first she barely noticed it. Then she looked again. The numbers were correct. Her company had crossed its first major revenue milestone. Vanessa leaned back in her chair and stared through the glass toward the rain-soaked yard below. No celebration followed. No champagne. No dramatic speech. She simply allowed herself a quiet smile before returning to work. Because the achievement represented more than money. It represented freedom. Nobody could take that from her. Nobody could define her future for her again. Back at Willow Creek Estate, the unanswered mystery waiting inside the convoy continued pulling the attention of every guest. The rear passenger door remained partially open. Raijan watched from across the reception area while uncertainty slowly replaced confidence. He still believed he understood the story. He still believed he knew the woman he had invited. What he did not realize was that the version of Vanessa living in his memory no longer existed. The woman he remembered had been left behind years ago in a small office with worn carpet, fading paint, and a folding table. The woman approaching the wedding now was someone entirely different. The meeting that changed everything happened on a day that looked completely ordinary. The sky above Atlanta hung low with gray clouds, and a steady rain tapped against the windows of a regional logistics conference hosted inside a downtown hotel. Vanessa Carter had attended for one reason and one reason only. She hoped to secure a transportation contract large enough to expand her company beyond state lines. At the time, that goal felt ambitious. She arrived carrying a laptop bag, a folder of proposals, and realistic expectations. She did not arrive expecting her future to change. The conference itself was far from glamorous. There were no television cameras, no celebrity speakers, and no dramatic announcements. Rows of business owners filled meeting rooms discussing freight routes, supply chains, and operational efficiency. Vanessa listened carefully, took notes, and spent the day speaking with potential clients. Like every other opportunity she pursued, she treated this one as another step forward rather than a life-changing event. During a break between presentations, the storm outside intensified. Rain hammered against the glass walls of the hotel lobby while attendees gathered near coffee stations waiting for the weather to ease. Vanessa stood near a window reviewing emails when a stack of papers suddenly scattered across the marble floor nearby. An older gentleman carrying a briefcase had lost control of several documents when another attendee accidentally brushed past him. Contracts, reports, and handwritten notes spread in every direction. Most people noticed. Very few stopped. Vanessa immediately stepped forward and helped gather the papers. Together they collected pages before the air conditioning could send them farther across the lobby. "Thank you," the man said with a warm smile. "Most people pretend they do not see things like that." Vanessa handed him the final document. "Everyone is busy. That does not mean they should stop being decent." The man studied her for a moment before extending his hand. "William Harrison." The name required no introduction. Vanessa recognized it instantly. William Harrison was one of the most respected transportation investors in the country. His companies operated across multiple states. Entire industries paid attention when he made decisions. Yet standing there in the hotel lobby, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a thoughtful businessman grateful for a simple act of kindness. Their conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. They discussed logistics, customer retention, and operational discipline. When William asked about her company, Vanessa answered honestly. She did not exaggerate. She did not try to impress him. She simply described the business she was building. By the time the storm began easing outside, they exchanged business cards and went their separate ways. Months later, another meeting followed. Ten anote. William never handed Vanessa success. He never offered shortcuts. What he offered was something far more valuable. Access to rooms where results mattered more than appearances. Introductions to people who respected competence. Opportunities that still had to be earned. Over time, mutual respect replaced introductions. Trust replaced assumptions. And while guests at Willow Creek Estate stood staring at the convoy waiting beside the fountain, none of them realized that the most important person connected to those vehicles had entered Vanessa's life not through wealth, power, or privilege, but because she stopped to help a stranger pick papers up from a floor. The invitation remained inside Vanessa Carter's desk drawer for nearly 2 weeks before she made a final decision. Not because she was afraid to attend. Not because she was unsure of herself. The hesitation came from a simple question. Why go at all? On a quiet Thursday evening, the office had finally emptied. The last employee had gone home nearly an hour earlier. Outside, the warehouse lights cast long reflections across the parking lot while freight trucks moved steadily through loading bays preparing for overnight routes. Vanessa sat alone behind her desk reviewing reports she had already finished reading. Her attention kept drifting toward the invitation resting inside the drawer. Eventually, she opened it again. The heavy paper looked exactly the same as it had the day it arrived. Elegant lettering. Formal language. Careful presentation. Yet the meaning behind it felt clearer now than before. She understood Ryan better than most people ever would. Success had changed his circumstances, but it had not changed his desire to be seen winning. Somewhere deep down, he wanted witnesses. The wedding was not only a celebration. It was also a stage. Vanessa folded the invitation and placed it back on the desk. Then she looked through the office window toward the busy warehouse beyond. Forklifts moved between loading areas. Employees coordinated shipments. Computer screens tracked deliveries moving across several states. Everything she saw existed because of thousands of ordinary decisions made over many years. Nothing had been handed to her. Nothing had appeared overnight. Every achievement carried fingerprints from countless mornings when nobody else was awake. Her phone rang softly. William Harrison. Vanessa answered. Their conversation began with business as usual. Contract negotiations. Expansion plans. Industry forecasts. Then William asked a question. Have you decided whether you are going? Vanessa smiled faintly. I am still thinking about it. A brief silence followed. Rain tapped lightly against the office windows. Then do not make the decision based on him, William said. Make it based on you. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. What does that mean? It means the past only has power when you continue asking permission from it. The words stayed with her long after the call ended. Later that evening, she drove home beneath a sky filled with fading shades of orange and blue. Her neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights glowed softly along tree-lined streets. After dinner, she stepped onto her back patio carrying a glass of iced tea and watched the sunset disappear beyond the rooftops. The world felt peaceful. For the first time since receiving the invitation, she stopped thinking about Ryan altogether. She stopped thinking about the divorce. She stopped thinking about what anyone expected her to feel. Instead, she thought about freedom. Real freedom was not avoiding the places that once hurt you. Real freedom was being able to walk into those places without carrying the pain anymore. The next morning, Vanessa arrived at the office before sunrise. The building stood silent except for the distant hum of machinery preparing for another day. She unlocked her office, opened the desk drawer, and picked up the invitation one final time. Then she placed it carefully inside her briefcase. No dramatic speech followed. No emotional declaration. Just a simple decision made by a woman who no longer needed anyone else's approval. Back at Willow Creek Estate, the rear passenger door of the waiting SUV remained partially open while hundreds of guests stared toward the convoy. None of them realized that the person inside had not come looking for closure. She had already found that years ago. The handle finally moved. A collective silence swept across Willow Creek Estate as the rear passenger door opened. For a moment, nobody stepped out. The pause seemed deliberate, allowing anticipation to spread through the crowd like a ripple across still water. Then a polished black shoe touched the pavement. Several guests leaned forward. Others exchanged curious glances. A tall man emerged from the vehicle with calm confidence, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his expression composed. Recognition did not happen all at once. It began with a few people near the entrance. A senior executive from a transportation company straightened immediately. An investment banker whispered something to his wife. A corporate attorney lowered his champagne glass. One by one, faces changed. William Harrison had arrived. Ryan felt it before he fully understood it. The atmosphere around the reception shifted in a way he could not control. Attention no longer rested on the wedding. It rested on the man standing beside the convoy. Yet William was not looking toward the guests. It was looking back toward the vehicle. Then a second door opened. Vanessa Carter stepped into the late afternoon sunlight. No dramatic gesture followed. No attempt to command attention. She simply emerged from the SUV and adjusted the sleeve of her navy dress before lifting her eyes toward the estate. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped again. Some guests blinked in surprise. Others looked from Vanessa to William and back again as if trying to solve a puzzle. Ryan stared across the distance separating them. The woman standing beside the convoy looked nothing like the version preserved in his memory. Years had changed her. Not physically as much as emotionally. The uncertainty that once lived behind her eyes had disappeared. In its place stood quiet confidence. She looked comfortable in her own success. Comfortable in her own life. Comfortable in a room that Ryan believed belonged to him. Vanessa began walking toward the reception area. William matched her pace without speaking. Security personnel remained several steps behind. Their presence felt professional rather than theatrical. The closer Vanessa came, the more guests noticed details they had missed before. The elegance of her appearance. The ease in her posture. The fact that she seemed completely unaffected by hundreds of eyes watching her. Near the entrance, Emily tightened her grip on Ryan's arm. "You know her?" she asked softly. Ryan nodded without taking his eyes off Vanessa. "Yes." It was the shortest answer he could manage. Because explaining Vanessa had become impossible. The story he once told people no longer matched reality. Around them, whispers grew louder. Guests who remembered Vanessa from years ago struggled to reconcile old assumptions with what stood before them now. The woman they expected to arrive carrying regret had arrived carrying something entirely different. Peace. Vanessa reached the entrance to the reception pavilion and paused briefly. Her gaze moved across familiar faces. Former acquaintances. Old colleagues. People who once knew fragments of her life and assumed they knew the whole story. None of them seemed certain what to say. William glanced toward her and offered a small nod. Vanessa smiled faintly. Then together they stepped into the reception, and in that instant Ryan realized the afternoon was no longer unfolding according to the script he had imagined. The reception never fully recovered its original rhythm after Vanessa Carter entered the pavilion. Music continued playing. Servers moved between tables carrying trays of champagne. Guests smiled, laughed, and posed for photographs. Yet beneath the polished surface of the celebration, attention had shifted. Conversations no longer revolved around the wedding. They revolved around the woman who had just walked in beside William Harrison. Vanessa noticed the stares but did not react to them. She greeted familiar faces politely and thanked people for their kind words. Years earlier, she might have felt uncomfortable standing in a room filled with people connected to Ryan's success. Tonight, she felt none of that. Confidence built over time tends to arrive quietly. It does not demand recognition because it no longer depends on it. Across the pavilion, Ryan watched from beside the stage. His smile remained intact whenever guests approached, but his focus kept drifting back toward Vanessa. Emily noticed it too. She followed his gaze and studied the growing crowd around Vanessa and William. More people seemed interested in meeting them with every passing minute. Executives crossed the room to shake William's hand. Investors introduced themselves. Business owners waited patiently for opportunities to join conversations. The reaction was impossible to ignore. Eventually, Ryan made his way across the reception floor. Guests instinctively stepped aside. Some sensed something important was about to happen. Others were simply curious. Ryan stopped in front of Vanessa. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Years of history stood silently between them. Then Ryan smiled. "Vanessa. I am glad you came." His tone sounded warm enough for anyone listening nearby. Vanessa returned the smile. "Thank you for inviting me." Nothing more. No bitterness. No sarcasm. No visible emotion beyond simple courtesy. Ryan had expected something different. Maybe resentment. Maybe discomfort. Something that would place him in control of the interaction. Instead, Vanessa seemed completely unaffected by the setting around her. William extended a hand. Ryan shook it. The gesture lasted only a second, but the effect lingered. Nearby guests exchanged glances. Several recognized William immediately. Others recognized the way important people responded to him. A few minutes later, another guest approached the group. Then another. Conversations shifted naturally toward business. Industry trends. Expansion opportunities. Strategic partnerships. Ryan listened carefully. At first, he assumed Vanessa was simply benefiting from William's influence. Then details began emerging. A logistics network operating across multiple states. New distribution centers. Rapid growth projections. A company attracting attention from major investors. The more he listened, the less the story made sense. Finally, a senior investor standing nearby smiled at Vanessa. "Your company has exceeded every forecast we reviewed last year," he said. "The growth has been remarkable." Several guests turned toward her. Vanessa thanked him politely. Nothing about her reaction suggested surprise. This was normal for her now. Ryan felt something shift inside him. The realization arrived slowly but unmistakably. William Harrison was not the reason for Vanessa's success. It was connected to it, certainly. But he was not the source. The source was standing directly in front of him. The woman he once believed could not succeed without him had built something powerful enough to earn the respect of people he spent years trying to impress. Around them, the reception lights glowed warmer as evening approached. The celebration continued. Yet for Ryan, the afternoon had become something entirely different. For the first time, he understood that the person everyone had underestimated was never Vanessa. It had been him. As evening settled over Willow Creek Estate, the reception lights began glowing brighter against the darkening sky. Music drifted through the pavilion. Laughter returned to scattered corners of the celebration. Photographers continued capturing smiles and champagne toasts. Though anyone arriving late, the wedding would have appeared perfectly normal. Yet the people who had witnessed the afternoon understood something had changed. Not because of a confrontation. Not because of an argument. Because a story many believed for years had quietly fallen apart. Vanessa Carter stood near the edge of the reception speaking with a small group of executives. The conversation centered on business, growth, and future opportunities. Nothing dramatic. Nothing designed to attract attention. Yet attention found her anyway. Confidence built through experience has a way of changing how people see you. Ryan watched from across the pavilion. For most of the evening, he had tried to focus on the celebration surrounding him. The speeches. The guests. The photographs. Yet his thoughts continued returning to the same realization. The woman standing across the room was not someone who had survived despite hardship. She had succeeded because of how she faced it. The difference mattered. Years earlier, Ryan believed leaving Vanessa placed him ahead in life. Looking at her now, he understood how incomplete that assumption had been. Success was not a finish line where one person arrived before another. It was something deeper. Something quieter. Across the room, a senior investor approached Vanessa and thanked her for a recent partnership. Another executive discussed plans for a regional expansion. William Harrison listened with a faint smile before stepping aside to allow Vanessa to answer questions herself. The gesture revealed more than any introduction could have. It was not speaking for her. It never had been. She had earned her place through her own work. The respect surrounding her belonged to her. As the evening continued, guests gradually stopped viewing Vanessa through the lens of her past. They began seeing her for what she had become. A successful entrepreneur. A respected leader. A woman completely comfortable with who she was. The transformation felt subtle, yet it changed everything. Near sunset, the final traces of daylight disappeared beyond the trees surrounding the estate. Vanessa glanced at her watch and quietly thanked the people gathered around her. William stepped closer. "Ready?" he asked. Vanessa smiled. "I think I am." There was no reason to stay longer. She had not come seeking validation. She had not come seeking revenge. Most importantly, she had not come seeking Ryan. She had come because she wanted proof that the past no longer controlled her. And now she had it. Together they walked toward the exit. Guests noticed and slowly turned to watch. Some offered smiles. Others nodded respectfully. A few seemed reflective, as though reconsidering assumptions they once accepted without question. Ryan remained near the reception floor. As Vanessa passed, their eyes met briefly. No speech followed. No dramatic farewell. Years ago, she might have needed one. Tonight, she did not. Vanessa offered a small nod and continued walking. Outside, the convoy waited beside the fountain exactly where it had arrived. Drivers opened doors. The cool evening air carried the scent of roses across the estate. Vanessa paused for a moment before entering the vehicle and looked back toward the illuminated reception. Once, she might have viewed that scene as a reminder of loss. Tonight, it looked different. It looked finished. She stepped into the SUV. The door closed softly. One by one, the vehicles pulled away and disappeared down the winding road. Being here, the wedding continued. Ahead of her, a future she built with her own hands waited. And somewhere between those two worlds existed the truth nobody at Willow Creek Estate would forget. She did not return to prove them wrong. She returned because she no longer needed to prove anything at all.